This is A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's take a look at the top stories making news around the world. A magnitude 7.7 earthquake kills at least 20 people in eastern Indonesia. Lebanon says an Israeli airstrike kills women and children deep inside the country. And Armenia moves to restore trade links with Azerbaijan and Turkey. A powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake has struck eastern Indonesia, collapsing buildings and trapping people beneath the rubble. Rescue teams are battling landslides and communication failures to reach the communities closest to the epicenter.
The earthquake hit the Flores region early on Saturday, causing widespread damage and panic. In the port town of Malmö, local rescue officials report dozens of casualties, with survivors still trapped under the rubble as search operations get underway. Casualty figures remain uncertain as emergency operations proceed. While local rescue agencies report heavy casualties, the National Disaster Mitigation Agency says its data collection is still ongoing. Verified video shows parts of a building collapsing into dust as people run into the streets. The epicenter was located off the north coast of Flores at a depth of 15 kilometers. Authorities initially issued a tsunami warning, but lifted it a short time later. However, waves of less than 1 meter were recorded, and the region has since been hit by dozens of aftershocks, including a 6.1 magnitude tremor. Rescue teams now face severe logistical challenges. Rescuers have yet to reach Nagakeo, the region closest to the epicenter, after landslides blocked road access. Some teams are now attempting to reach the area by ferry. Around 2,000 residents have evacuated the region, which is currently dealing with damaged infrastructure, power outages, and disrupted communications.
Speaking at the Nassau County Police Academy in New York on Friday, Donald Trump vowed to declare the Strait of Hormuz U.S. territory once the war with Iran is over. The U.S. president also claimed that Tehran was being heavily defeated. Let's take a listen.
And after we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States.
And Iran has hit back at Donald Trump's vow to declare the Strait of Hormuz U.S. territory, insisting Washington has no control over the vital waterway. Tehran says it alone will decide when the route reopens and has threatened to maintain its blockade. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi said the strait could not be seized by a tweed aircraft carrier, executive order, or election speech. His response came after Donald Trump told supporters in New York on Friday that he would claim the waterway once Iran was defeated. Iran's military says no vessel can pass safely without its permission. The strait between Iran and Oman is one of the world's most important routes for Gulf energy exports. Russia and Ukraine traded another wave of overnight drone and missile attacks targeting industrial, port and logistics infrastructure on both sides. At the same time, Ukraine says it is regaining territory on the battlefield while facing growing financial pressure as military spending continues to rise.
Russia said its air defenses shot down nearly 600 Ukrainian drones across multiple regions, as well as over the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov and Crimea. In Russia's Samara region, authorities reported damage to an industrial facility, while Ukraine said a key enterprise linked to the Russian space agency was hit. Kyiv also claimed strikes on an airbase in the Nizhny Novgorod region and an oil facility at Ust-Luga. Moscow, meanwhile, said its forces struck port infrastructure in Odessa, Izmail and Pivdeny, alleging the sites were being used to support the Ukrainian military. Russian strikes also caused casualties across Ukraine. A 3-month-old baby was killed and 11 people injured in Dnipropetrovsk, while a double strike in Sumy killed 2 people, including a 9-year-old boy. Another attack on Kramatorsk killed one person and injured more than a dozen others. On the battlefield, Russia's Vostok group claimed it had captured 19 settlements during its summer campaign, including 7 in Dnipropetrovsk and 12 in Zaporizhzhia. The claims could not be independently verified. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, however, said Ukraine's counteroffensive had reversed almost all Russian gains in Dnipropetrovsk since June 2025 and liberated 26 settlements. He also acknowledged that Ukraine is facing growing financial pressure after military spending rose sharply in the first half of the year. Parliament has approved an additional €30 billion for security and defence, bringing planned spending for 2026 to about €85 billion. The European Union has agreed a €90 billion loan package for Ukraine for 2026 and 2027, while the International Monetary Fund says continued foreign support remains crucial to maintaining the country's financial stability.
Fuel shortages are once again causing disruption across Moscow, with long queues reported at petrol stations and supplies of AI-95 fuel becoming increasingly limited. The renewed shortages come as Ukrainian drone strikes continue to target Russian energy infrastructure, raising fresh concerns over fuel distribution in the capital and several other regions.
Fuel shortages have returned to Moscow as Ukrainian drone attacks continue to hit Russian energy infrastructure. Long queues were seen at petrol stations across the Russian capital on Friday. Drivers say AI-95 petrol is becoming difficult to find.
We're struggling quite a lot because these queues take up so much time. It also affects our work. We're basically losing working hours just waiting to refuel. I've already been standing here for about 30 minutes, and as you can see, there are still 5 cars ahead of me. That will probably take another 20 minutes. I end up being away from work for about an hour just to fill up a company vehicle. So this problem hasn't gone away. As for how to deal with it, I honestly can't say.
The shortages first appeared in late June and early July after Ukrainian drones struck the Moscow oil refinery and other refining facilities across Russia. The situation had improved by mid-July.
This situation has been going on for several days. It's unexpected because we'd already relaxed and things had got better. But today the problems are back again. It's not pleasant, of course. At the weekend you want to go to your dacha, summer house in the countryside, but no one knows what the situation will be like there in the Moscow region.
Some petrol stations are now closed, while others are selling only diesel. Fuel supply problems have also returned in the Tula, Tambov and Kaluga regions, as well as in the Primorsky and Krasnodar territories. Russian regional authorities say an oil refinery in the city of Orsk was forced to shut down completely after a Ukrainian drone strike on August 12th. Ukraine has increased its attacks on Russian oil refining facilities this year in an effort to raise the cost of Russia's war in Ukraine. The strikes have caused periodic fuel shortages in several parts of the country.
Ukraine says it has completed an operation that recaptured 745 square kilometers and 26 settlements in the Dnipropetrovsk region, dealing a setback to Russian forces on the ground. But Kiev is facing a growing threat from the air, with Russia intensifying ballistic and hypersonic missile strikes as Ukraine struggles with shortages of Patriot interceptors. So is Ukraine's battlefield success sustainable, and can it withstand Russia's growing missile pressure? To discuss the latest developments, and we are joined by Yulia O'Connell, member of Dignitas, speaking to us from Kiev, Ukraine. Yulia, welcome to A News. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell, Ukraine says it has retaken 745 square kilometers and 26 settlements in Dnipropetrovsk. How significant is this operation militarily, and does it represent a genuine shift in the balance on the battlefield?
Well, I would say militarily it's significant, but it's not a strategic breakthrough. And when we talk about 745 square kilometers, it's not only Dnipro region, it's also parts of the Zaporizhia and parts of Donetsk region. So it's like a bigger sector. What makes it significant is to show that Ukraine with right forces, drones, intelligence can push back Russia. It shows that Ukraine takes initiative doing that, and Russia was going forced very slowly, incrementally gaining land, but now it's a pushback. But to show that, or to say that's a big success, it has to be repeated, in my opinion, many times and across front line at different sectors. So it's a great news, but it's definitely not going to change the course of the war right now.
So President Zelensky says almost 10,000 Russian soldiers were killed during the operation. How should we assess these casualty claims, and what do they tell us about the intensity of the fighting in the sector?
Well, 10,000 was assessed now, but in the past 4 to 5 months, numbers were up to 25,000 casualties, Russian casualties on the battlefield. It shows the difference of the war. It's a drone war right now. So Russia keeps sending people, and Ukrainians fight with the asymmetric tools, which drones are. So it's not only the land is not being taken by Russian forces, but it also shows that disproportionate loss that Russia has. That being said, they're not stopping. They sent people to basically find Ukrainian positions with the people. So they send them as a testing, and Ukrainian fighting back with a drone, with a different type of drones, with a different type of knowledge how to use this fighting in the way asymmetric war should be fought.
Mr. O'Connell, Russia has increased its use of ballistic and hypersonic missiles, while Ukraine says its supply of Patriot interceptors has become critically low. How serious is this vulnerability for Kiev and other major Ukrainian cities?
I can tell you that being in Kiev, I can hear ballistic missiles coming down extremely fast and in numbers. The other night, I was counting 15 missiles, 15 explosions that sound like ballistic missiles. So yes, it's definitely a huge challenge. On August 5th, Russia sent 24 ballistic missiles, and unfortunately none of them were intercepted. So that's a big challenge for Ukraine right now, and the lack of the Patriot systems is clearly significant. Ukraine learned and has a skill how to extremely effective intercept Shahed drones, and does pretty well on cruise missiles, but ballistic missiles is truly right now a challenge, and that's what Russia is using in their tactics to understanding the vulnerability of Ukraine right now.
So Russia is reportedly producing more than 100 ballistic and hypersonic missiles a month, and maybe building stocks for a major winter campaign against Ukraine's energy infrastructure. How dangerous could the upcoming winter be?
Well, the last winter was very difficult. We know that there was buildings without heating, water supply. So that could be, people are understanding that next winter could be extremely difficult, even probably more difficult. Now it's a political decision whether United States and Europe would be okay with a lower stock of the Patriot missiles and give some to Ukraine for this winter. And I hope this political decision would be made in favor of Ukraine. But other than that, it's not looking great for the winter. The only thing that we also can say that Russia, we are moving towards to the Russia. Ukraine is moving towards to the Russia, and people are suffering on the Russian land. Their business, they are losing their businesses, they are losing their logistics, and hope is that there is some type of pressure inside of the Russia onto the Russian government that this war would see some kind of prospects of ceasefire.
Ms. O'Connell, Russia's strategy appears increasingly focused on combining drones with ballistic, hypersonic and other missiles. Is Moscow trying to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses rather than simply destroy individual targets?
They are trying to do both. I believe they have a goal of capturing Ukraine, so they are both overwhelming the Ukrainian air defense and targeting certain areas that I would say some parts of the cities in Dnipro, in Sumy, in Kiev are some parts they hit so consistently, it's levels to the ground. There's a spots of like basically nothing in the middle of the cities. So they do both. And they also trying to stretch Ukrainian air defense. They also trying to find Ukrainian position, overwhelm the command system. So they're doing it all. They're doing brutal war. So everything.
We've also seen another exchange of the bodies of fallen soldiers, with 261 Ukrainian bodies returned and 24 Russian bodies handed back. What does the continuation of these repatriation operations tell us about the humanitarian dimension of the war and the channels of communication that remain open between Moscow and Kiev?
It shows that it's incredibly important for the families to receive the bodies. It's incredibly important for the families to be able to give the last, bury the body correct on their own land. But it just shows that honestly, it's a very, very small and a thin stream of communication if we do not even exchange the prisoners of war, which are still in Russia, but only bodies being exchanged. And again, it's super important, but it's a very, very small and thin stream of communication.
Yulia O'Connell, a member of Dignitas, speaking to us from Kiev. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your analysis. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Women and children are among those killed in Israel's deepest airstrike inside Lebanon since the ceasefire. The attack destroyed a house in the country's south, according to Lebanese authorities.
7 people, including 2 women and 3 children, were killed when Israeli warplanes struck a house on the outskirts of Ansar in the Nabatea district near the town of Zrariya. 2 others were injured in the attack, which destroyed the building. The national news agency said the strike was the first Israeli airstrike to reach this depth inside Lebanon since a ceasefire took effect 2 months ago. Another Israeli airstrike on Deir al-Zarani in the Nabatea district killed 2 people and injured 9 others, according to the health ministry. Israeli warplanes also carried out strikes on the Ali al-Taher hills near Nabatea al-Fawqa. The Israeli military said it targeted Hezbollah infrastructure in the Nabatea and Ansar areas in response to an alleged action by the group against Israeli soldiers operating in the area. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned the continued Israeli strikes, saying they violated the ceasefire framework, the work of the Military Coordination Group and international law protecting civilians. The country's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam described the escalation in Nabatea, Ansar, Deir al-Zahrani and nearby villages as extremely dangerous. He said the victims of the Ansar strike were civilians and not military targets, stressing that any armed infrastructure on Lebanese territory was the responsibility of the Lebanese state. The attacks come despite a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, which entered into force on April 17th and was later extended several times. Israel launched a new wave of attacks on Lebanon on March 2nd. Lebanon's health ministry says 4,335 people have been killed and 12,277 injured since then.
5 years ago today, Taliban fighters entered Kabul, completing a rapid takeover of Afghanistan as the former government collapsed. Since then, the Taliban have consolidated their rule, but Afghanistan remains a country facing economic pressure, international isolation and sweeping restrictions on women and girls. Tamim Bahi's reports from Kabul.
5 years ago today, scenes from this city were being watched around the world. Taliban fighters were entering Kabul. The former republic was collapsing, and thousands of Afghans were desperately trying to leave. Today, the guns of that war are largely silent. However, Afghanistan has been transformed. The Taliban's return on August 15, 2021 ended 2 decades of Western-backed government and brought the movement back to power 20 years after it had been removed. For the Taliban, the anniversary is a victory. The authorities say they have restored security, brought the country under a single administration, and expanded Afghanistan's political and economic relations with its neighbors. And on the streets of Kabul, many Afghans acknowledge that the large-scale fighting that once affected much of the country has ended.
The Islamic Emirate has both positive and negative points. Among the positive points is that security has prevailed. We can go anywhere, anytime we want, for a holiday or vacation. The same is true with infrastructure projects like the TAPI project, as well as the many road projects in cities and villages. We want to ask the Islamic Emirate to provide jobs. As you can see, there is a lack of employment. We want the government to provide us with jobs. Women should be allowed to work, especially in places such as health centers, where we need them most. And our sisters should be allowed to go to schools and receive an education.
But peace has not meant prosperity for everyone. The World Bank says Afghanistan's economy is growing again, but rapid population growth and the return of millions of Afghans are putting pressure on jobs and incomes, while GDP per person has fallen. Nowhere is the change more visible or controversial than for women and girls. Afghanistan remains the only country where girls and women are barred from secondary and higher education, including universities. UNESCO estimates 2.4 million girls have been excluded from secondary education since the Taliban returned to power. And a new UN Women research says half of the women it surveyed now leave their homes only once or twice a month. The Taliban authorities reject international criticism of their record and say women enjoy their rights under their interpretation of Islamic law and Afghan culture.
Over the past 5 years, we have had both difficult days and experienced positive changes. In terms of security, the situation has improved significantly, and major national infrastructure projects have also been implemented. However, the restrictions on women's education and employment have been very difficult for us. We want to work and continue our education. For the future, we ask the authorities to allow women to work and receive an education above grade 6.
Internationally, the picture is also changing. Russia formally recognized the Taliban government in 2025, while other countries have increased diplomatic and economic engagement with Kabul without taking that final step. Women, human rights concerns, and questions over Afghanistan's political system continue to stand in the way of broader recognition. 5 years after the Taliban returned to power, Kabul is no longer a city at war. But for millions of Afghans, the questions are now about what comes next. Jobs, education, basic freedoms, and Afghanistan's place in the world. The Taliban have secured control of the country. The bigger test now is what they choose to do with it. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Armenia says the planned Trump route for international peace and prosperity will remain under its full jurisdiction with no foreign security forces deployed. A senior lawmaker says the wider process of restoring regional transport links is already underway.
Armenian lawmaker Sarkis Handanyan has said the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, TRIP, is an infrastructure project rather than a territory or military base and does not provide for the presence of security forces from any other country. Handanyan made the remarks during discussions on his candidacy for chairman of the Armenian Parliament's Standing Committee on Foreign Relations. He said security within TRIP would be ensured by Armenia and the country's relevant authorities as stipulated in the agreement. Handanyan also said the process of opening regional communications had already begun. Armenia has already been using Azerbaijani railways for several months, and the ban on using the Ahalkalaki Kars railway has also been lifted. These are also details of the unblocking process, he said. Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIP, a connectivity project aimed at linking mainland Azerbaijan to its Nakhchivan exclave through Armenia and integrating the region into wider east-west trade routes.
This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned for more updates.